Why does your energy bill keeps climbing and what can you actually do about it? Stay tuned to find out. As rising costs and grid chaos shake up the way we all use power, both utilities and consumers are scrambling to adapt. To make sense of it all, we turn to an expert. On today's episode, my guest is Hannah Bascom. She's the Senior Vice President at Uplight. Uplight is a tech company that works with power companies to make energy more easier to use and more affordable. And throughout the episode, you're gonna learn how. So tune in if you want to hear more about why your energy bill is changing, how tech can help you save, and how utilities are keeping up, and what that means for you. Welcome to the fresh episode of the Green New Perspective podcast.
This episode of Green New Perspective is brought to you by New Perspective Marketing. For over 20 years, New Perspective has helped future-focused B2B tech companies grow by building thought leadership, attracting better qualified leads, and driving pipeline growth. If you're ready for smart strategies, measurable results, and a partner who's invested in your success, visit npws.com to learn more.
Hello, Hannah, and welcome to the Green New Perspective podcast.
Hello, Dunya. Thanks for having me.
So for starters, can you introduce Uplight, what Uplight does, and why is that important right now?
Absolutely. So Uplight is a technology company that helps utilities, grid operators, and ultimately their end consumers deploy, manage, monetize, and conserve energy resources. So that is so important right now because in a world of AI and lots of load growth, we are going to have to fundamentally think differently about how it is that we use the grid in order to minimize the costs that all of us wind up paying for the investment that will need to happen on the grid. So thinking about how do we leverage various distributed energy resources, or DERs for short, things like solar and batteries and smart thermostats, EVs, will be really, really important. So that's the stuff that Uplight thinks about. How do you manage all those resources? How do you get normal people and businesses involved in those programs and make it as easy as possible for them to understand just really what's going on with their energy?
You have worked across the spectrum from consumer tech to electrification, and now you're leading growth at Uplight. So what connects those roles to you?
Well, I started the energy part of my career working for a utility itself. So Pacific Gas and Electric Company in San Francisco. I was so fortunate to start that part of my career there because they are one of the largest utilities in the US. They're also one of the most progressive in terms of the programs that they're offering. And so I just learned a ton about how utilities make decisions, how the regulatory environment impacts that. And that really core and niche set of expertise has served me super well for the rest of my career. So it's the thing that ultimately enabled me to get hired at Nest in 2014. I was the first person that ever had any kind of utility background. And there was the vague notion that Nest was this amazing energy efficiency tool that also could do load flexibility. And utilities had all this money that they could use to help to fund those kinds of programs. And so, gosh, wouldn't it make sense to harness that, get more Nest deployed, and then figure out how to leverage them on an ongoing basis? And so that was really the role that I played at Nest, building out the strategy and the team and the partnerships to enable that. And then, within Big Google, once Nest was integrated into Big Google, it was really kind of more of the same. How do you figure out how to scale those programs as Google, which of course is not at its heart an energy services company for customers, but is a really important platform for those customers. So thinking about how to leverage the broader ecosystem to help scale programs and leverage the best of Google to get customers engaged was what I really thought all about. And then I was in an electrification technology company called Span for a little bit as well. And that was, more of the same expertise that I brought, but also having gone through the process with Nest of scaling up the business. I just did a lot of fundamentals within Span to help them set up for scale and success on an ongoing basis. And then have been at Uplight now for a little over 2 years. And it's been so much fun to lead growth in the commercial organization because it being at the nexus of the energy ecosystem and the utility ecosystem to bring together all of those things, again, really in pursuit of scale. And I will say that it's been an amazing ride at this moment because even since I started 2 years ago, the narrative about load growth and the importance of why load flexibility is such a crucial part of the solution to climate change, yes, but just running the grid, right? Just the basics of making sure the lights are going on every day and making sure that costs are staying as affordable as possible for our consumers. So it feels like there has never been a more important moment for the work that we're doing. And so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, we have only started this conversation and we mentioned grid a couple of times. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of talk about the growing energy demand and the grid being under pressure. So what's actually happening and what's not being talked about?
Well, I actually think there's been quite a lot of talk about the impact that AI has on load growth. And then even in more mainstream publications now, there's chatter about how are we going to make sure that the grid stays functional in a world where there is such extreme projections for, in some scenarios, doubling the size of the grid in the next couple decades. So I have been excited to see that because I think that we need more awareness of the problem and then more focus on the solution. So just a couple of fun facts, the average utilization today of the grid is something like 40%, which just means that there's a ton of excess capacity most of the time on the grid. And so it makes perfect intuitive sense to figure out before you go and double the size of the grid, let's figure out how to use that excess 60% that's hanging out most of the year. There was a report that came out recently from Duke University, and basically we can add half of the load that we need to the grid today if we flex 0.5% of the hours every year, right? So it's just all to say there's a tiny sliver of the year where we are in a pickle and there's not enough space on the grid to deliver load to not only, new data centers, but everybody else that's already connected to the grid. So let's figure out how to fix that. And then, of course, yes, invest incrementally in what we need to make sure that we continue to have the reliability that we need, we've come to expect on the grid, especially in a world of more extreme weather events, both hot and cold.
And how can smarter energy use on the customer side help solve these problems? Not all of them, but some maybe.
Yeah, I am a big believer since my days at Nest that you really have to make this accessible to customers. So, probably not you and I, but most normal people don't spend a whole ton of time thinking about their electricity usage. I would actually posit that now, because of the increases in electricity costs that we've seen, people are starting to think a lot more about their bill. So the latest data that I've seen is that 1 in 3 customers are actually behind on their energy bills right now because of the increases of cost that we've seen. So I think this is increasingly going to be something that people are concerned about. But the connection between the bill and how energy is used is very complicated. It's complicated even for me to figure out how to best optimize for my time of use rate, or if I, install a heat pump, what will that do to my bills? So all of that is confusing. So for us at Uplight, the key is let's make it as simple as possible for customers to understand what options they have, install the right equipment, and connect it to load flexibility programs so that they're able to manage their bills as best as possible. And also then so that the grid can benefit from all of those connected devices as well. And not just residential customers, business customers as well. So it really is, it's a win-win for everyone.
You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you work with ideas like demand response, smart thermostats, battery programs. So for someone who's outside the industry, how would you explain what those things do and why do they matter?
Well, it's something that I have along the way had to talk a lot about. So automation, I really believe is crucial going forward to where we need to be. And a lot of these new devices, smart thermostats, EVs, etc., have the ability to automatically receive signals and shift energy when prices are the highest. And so that's very important for the grid and for ultimately everybody's bills, because those are the most costly times to turn on, incremental generation. So new gas power plants, flick those on. And so rather than paying one gas peaker plant for going on, 20, 40 hours a year, instead, you can pay a lot of different people to participate, a lot of times automatically, with the devices in their home, and they will see the benefit, but they won't otherwise be inconvenienced or uncomfortable. And so that is why it really matters. And so when everybody together is doing a little bit, it really adds up to tremendous potential for impact in terms of carbon savings, but then also just in, making sure that bills stay affordable for everybody.
And are utilities starting to use these tools differently than they did a few years ago, let's say?
For sure. For those of us who are more in the industry, meeting load growth is a very daunting task, because if you look at here in the US, we need about 200 gigawatts of incremental capacity between now and 2030. If you look at the interconnection queues that exist today, they're 5 years long. There's a lot of capacity in the queue, but we couldn't build that incremental capacity that we need as quickly as would be required. And that's just the interconnection queues, right? That's not even counting, we have a bunch of supply chain issues with gas turbines and various parts and tariff impact, all those things, right? Like those are super disruptive also to our ability to just get new generation online. So even if you could build it all, it's going to be too expensive. So that's the other thing. Already, as I mentioned before, we're seeing incremental increases to the tune of, 10, 20, 30, 50% in the past several years of people's electric bills. That's going to be just foundationally a problem in the pursuit of meeting this new load growth that's required. So if you can't build it fast enough, you couldn't build it affordably enough, you have to just rethink how you're going to do things. And so that's where all these devices come into play. And the other thing that utilities are starting to recognize is, I think for a long time, there's a lot of skepticism about how can we rely on these distributed energy resources in people's homes and businesses as a true asset for the grid. And it was always a head scratcher for me, because there's a reason that your retirement account is a portfolio, right? Like portfolio is always going to outperform a single asset in terms of, sustainable, predictable performance over many years. So that's what we're doing. We are bundling all of these assets together and turning them into a power plant, but one that is not single point of failure, one that has, many tens or hundreds of thousands of devices included. And over time, we get super, super predictable results. And the other thing that's really cool is that the way that we are at Uplight deploying algorithms, we actually can make the load profile look basically exactly like a power plant. So, you see like all the load turned on and it's very flat, and then at the end it drops off. So that is a relatively new program that we have that we call predictive capacity dispatch, and we're rolling it out with lots of utilities now. And I would expect that as people get more comfortable with the fact that yes, this portfolio of assets can look and act just like a normal power plant that the guys on the supply side are really familiar with operating, they're going to start incorporating them more and more.
And utilities are big, complex organizations. What are some of the challenges working with them?
One of the things that's so interesting about utilities is that they are largely monopolies. And so one of the opportunities is that when you have success in one place with one utility, there's actually the ability to socialize all the information and to make it a case study, to make it publicly available. And then utilities in other places are like, that works great, I'll do it too. And the regulators in other places also, it's the same, right? So they look at successes in one jurisdiction and they think, oh gosh, we should do that here with our utilities. And so there's a lot of information sharing, but also because they're monopolies, because they're all regulated really differently, it also means that you have to go time and time again to regulators, to the utilities, to understand what's their business model, because that will also impact what they ultimately want to do. Right? So how are they regulated? How are they making money? What are their goals in terms of load flexibility or demand management? And then to a certain extent, kind of tailor some of the programmatic approaches to what those requirements are. So definitely pros and cons to an industry that is so fragmented, but also so open to sharing information.
B2B marketing is shifting fast. In our latest Marketing Trends report, we dug into what's moving the needle for growth-minded teams. A few standouts. AI is changing personalization fast. Trust-building content is outperforming polished sales pitches. And hybrid events are replacing static webinars. Whether you're in strategy, sales, or execution, this report helps you align with where the market is heading. Get your copy at mpws.net/trends. That's mpws.net/trends.
Can you tell our audience a success story, let's say, example of a utility you work with where the results were especially exciting?
Yeah, we are working with Puget Sound Energy in Washington. So 2 years ago now, the Washington legislator mandated that I think it's 10% of the peak load in the PSC territory had to be served by load flexibility. And so we secured a contract with them to do what I will call a true virtual power plant. Unlike traditional demand response program, which is, sometimes single asset like smart thermostats and paid, customers get $25 for participating every year. VPPs are paid on a per megawatt basis and lots of different devices. So oftentimes they're not always customers are earning pay for performance incentives. But anyhow, point being, so it's a big VPP program, lots of different kinds of devices and both residential and business customers. And we have grown that to almost 80 megawatts this year. So that is growing super duper quickly. It's more than doubled in size kind of year over year. And it's such a great model because you're seeing a lot more customer engagement. You're seeing more cost-effective use of resources. And we are beginning to see other states adopt this as well. So just this past week, actually, in Virginia, they passed a mandate for a VPP there. So it's great to see that, we've been successful with this VPP model with PSC, and now other states are really taking note and adopting them as well. And the other thing that I will say that PSC, and we have another client called Alliant that's in Iowa and Wisconsin. One of the things that they're doing in a really interesting way is rethinking the resources that they have with their customer programs so that they can be designed in a way that more closely matches the way that their supply desk procures resourcing, which I realize is a little esoteric, but just allow me. So if you have your traditional supply desk operator, they're thinking about their baseload resource, maybe nuclear, maybe always on coal, their mid-tier resources that kind of go up and down every day, depending on the way that load looks and the weather looks on the grid. And then you have these peaking resources that are typically gas, sometimes now batteries, sometimes demand response. But so we have worked to come up with this concept called the demand stack, which is reframing the resources that they have so that they can match each of those supply side resources. So as an example, your baseload resources are the everyday efficiency programs that your customers have access to. So all of those are electrons, basically, that are not being consumed that correspond to the supply, what you would need to go and procure on the supply side. And then you have mid-tier resourcing that every single day, customers on time of use rates are using a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what's happening with their price signals. And then VPPs or demand response as kind of the top of the cake. But by coordinating all of those resources, you're able to make sure that they are truly aligned with one another and complementary, as opposed to being sort of friction filled. So today, a lot of programs are designed separately such that you're not maximizing the benefit that you get from either the customers participating or ultimately the outputs. And so this demand stack is a new way of approaching planning so that it corresponds with truly the resource that the utility needs to provide to the grid.
And from your experience, what kind of things make these projects work well or hold them back?
It's so important to recognize that this is an ecosystem play. So at the end of the day, we're not going to be successful unless we have the myriad of customers that need to participate. But then beyond that, all the different OEMs that provide the devices that are saving energy and shifting energy. So today, as an example, we have over 65 different OEM partners that we work with for these programs. And that's the thing that enables them to really be impactful. So recognizing, ecosystem is hugely important. And then also just making sure that the regulators are on board and are informed about what the opportunity really is. Because I think there's still, especially in certain corners of the world right now, a lot of debate a lot of misinformation about what we need to do to ensure the reliability of the grid. And so really clearly making sure that the data, the facts are understood, and doing that in collaboration with the clients that we're serving is really important as well.
Let's go back to your role at Uplight to lead the growth team. What does that mean in simple terms, and how does your team help move the business forward?
Yeah. I get to do all the fun stuff. So my team is sales and marketing and partnerships in BD and all of our market development and kind of pre-sale stuff. So I get to sit very squarely at the intersection of the ecosystem of partners and clients that we have, and then also, making sure that internally our products and services are sort of keeping pace with where the market is going, and then ultimately, of course, influencing that market as well. So I love that the day-to-day, every single day looks a little bit different, whether I'm doing a client meeting or going to a conference or thinking through, new storytelling for the demand stack. I'm always using different parts of my brain. And the team that I work with is amazing. Just such smart, nice people. So it's also just really fun to spend time, solving hard problems together with them.
Yeah, I can imagine that a lot of your work involves turning ideas into action. So what's helped you and your team get people aligned and moving in the same direction when you're working with a lot of different clients, big clients?
It's such a good question. I think one of my foundational principles is always bias for action. And so I think a lot of what I do is just try to get people moving. And it's okay, especially, Uplight is still very much a startup, a scale up. So the most important thing for us is just to get going. And we're not always going to have these perfectly baked strategies, but if we are moving, I also have great faith in the team to evolve as we go. And people, because they are so mission driven, also get excited as we start to see success. And so then we refine and develop so that the things that we are doing become more scalable over time. And so that is really fun. We're actually hosting next week, maybe previously by the time this airs, but next week our customer conference. And the conference, the first year I was at Uplight, so this will be my third one, it was just a little chaotic at the end to pull things together because everyone was so excited about it, but we didn't have the right kind of rhythms and cadence to do the event planning and the content planning in the way that we would have wanted. And this year, it's been so smooth, right? We've tripled the size of the conference, more than that since the first year. And everybody is just off and running, putting together their slides, and the panels are awesome. So it's just, testament to the team and to just over time kind of refining as we are moving forward that is producing really great results.
So you're learning by practice, right? Congrats on the
100%,
event.
every day.
And when you're choosing what to focus on new markets, new partners, what do you look for?
It's a combination of things. So there's, of course, always, you can do a bunch of market assessment to understand what's the size of the market. And I think that is good discipline. So an example, Uplight was formed by a combination of a bunch of companies all coming together. So 8 in total to date startups have gotten mushed together to form Uplight. And so the last one that we acquired a little bit over a year ago was a company called AutoGrid. And they had really amazing capabilities that were quite incremental and distinct to the ones that we had. So it was such a kind of perfect combination of different capabilities. One of the things that also they brought with them was a myriad of international clients. And so part of the integration process was, let's take a look at the market. Let's take a look at this client. Do we think that the cost, that basically, the juice is worth the squeeze to invest here and grow it? Because it's oftentimes not as simple as you have this one client and you can kind of keep and grow them without broader infrastructure and investment, whether that's, localization of data or making sure that you are participating in the right conferences and regulatory proceedings. Like all of those things really are quite different from market to market. So I think it's always good, good discipline to look at what do we know about the market size. And then there's a certain amount also of huge clients who are deeply aligned and invested in what it is that you are doing should take you different places in the world or into new markets, because ultimately that's how you prove out proof of concepts and build things that then can be replicated elsewhere as well. So I also think it's really important to recognize those good kind of anchor and build around them.
From your seat, what's changing in the utility world? Well, at the moment and over, let's say, the next few years, and what we should pay attention to?
Well, I mean, load growth is the thing that really is driving everybody right now. So I think it's not that decarbonization doesn't matter anymore. Obviously, it really does. But I think when I look at the utility industry, when I started at PG&E 2010, the things that we were doing on the customer program side of things were because as a regulated monopoly, we had to help customers save energy and manage their bills. And California also, even at that time, had renewable portfolio standards, and they were trying to push the use of more renewables, less carbon intensive generation. And where that has evolved now is it's not compliance driven anymore. Utilities have to grapple with increased costs, both because of load growth, but then also wildfires is something that, we haven't really talked about, but they have a tremendous impact on ultimately the investment that's required in the grid and the costs that are getting passed on to customers. So now utilities are in a world where load is growing, costs are increasing like crazy, and they have to think differently about just how they're operating their business, because the traditional model that existed until basically now isn't really going to serve them anymore. And so it's a challenge for the utilities themselves, but then of course the regulators as well. So it is a very interesting and exciting time and difficult time to be in the space, because moving from just single power plants, one-way flows of electrons, to much more bidirectional, complex flows of electrons, but then also the overlay of the more extreme climate events too. Like all of those things together just make it a much more dynamic and challenging environment to operate in.
And well, let's finish this conversation on a positive note. So what gives you hope or energy about where this work is headed?
Yeah, I really believe in the inevitability of leveraging more DERs and more renewables. If you look at the costs of those things, they're just so much more compelling, competitive than kind of the business as usual kinds of resources and ways of doing things. So it is never easy. I always say that the status quo is the biggest competitor that we have, but I really do feel like there is no other way forward than to figure out how to harness the power of the customers, business and residential, as a crucial part of the grid. So I'm excited about that.
Well, love that. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for being our guest here on the Green New Perspective podcast.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Green New Perspective. This podcast is proudly sponsored by New Perspective. We are a Boston-based marketing agency working with Cleantech clients solely for over 20 years now. And if you want to check out how we help our Cleantech clients to grow, you can click on the link in the description of this episode. If you like what we do here with the podcast, giving some amazing people from all over the cleantech space a place where they can showcase their innovative tech aimed at combating climate change, you can support us in so many ways. You can leave reviews, comments, or consider subscribing to our channel on your favorite streaming platform. We've noticed that around 75% of you who are regularly watching our show are not subscribing. So just by hitting that subscribe button, you could help us to grow, to get even more people from the climate tech space and create additional content. So please consider doing that. Thank you in advance. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this episode, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye.